Okay, so I want to speak on something that started to bother me a little while ago. And think about it like this. Imagine you arrive at Soul Survivor and you're setting up your little camp and you see that someone else has arrived and they're nearby, but they're just by themselves. You're with your youth group and they're by themselves. I don't know what you would do in that situation, but I imagine a few of us would be like, oh, come and join us, come and camp with us. You can be part of our little group for this week if you've got no one else to hang out with. And let's say that you do that. This person comes and spends some time with you. And then after a couple of days, you start to notice that some of your stuff is going missing. So, some of the money that you had has been nicked out your tent and your phone's been nicked and your trainers, one of your personal trainers has gone missing. And you ring your phone to try and find out. You did that Find My iPhone thing where it makes a noise. And you hear it coming from this person's one-man tent. So you go over to their tent and you unzip it and you find inside not only your stuff, but like loads of people's stuff from your youth group. What would you do if that happened? I imagine probably most of us would say to our youth worker, would you mind throwing this person over the fence? Because you wouldn't want to live, none of us would want to live with someone kind of like in our lives who is stealing from us. And what I want to talk about this morning is the fact that we all have not someone, but something living in our lives that is stealing from us. And that thing that's stealing from me and from you is comparison. It's the way that we compare ourselves to other people. So comparison has been called the thief of joy. It steals your joy. And I remember it was about, like a month and a half ago. I had a really good day, and it was it was a Sunday, so it was a really good day. I was at church for most of it, and we saw God do some great stuff, and one of the highlights for me is someone became a Christian at the end. And I remember walking home from church at the end of the day, just feeling satisfied. You know how you do, like at the end of a great football match or a great meal, or if you're Mike, any meal, just feeling happy, feeling content. And I got home, and I did what I usually do when I get home, which is I went on Twitter. And I'm just flicking through, seeing what everyone else has been up to that day. And I saw this guy who does a similar thing to what I do. He speaks about the place and stuff like that. And I saw that he'd tweeted, and he was in another part of the world, and he tweeted about how he'd just been doing all this, speaking to all these thousands of people, and there was these photos that made it look like he'd done an amazing job. And I remember as I was lying on my sofa back in Watford, seeing that, and going from being really content and really satisfied with what had happened that day, really enjoying it, to just suddenly all of that just leaking out of me. And before I really knew it, I started to feel unhappy, I started to feel inadequate, I started to feel low and depressed, and I started to compare myself to this guy and think, oh my word, God's using him, and look at that, and maybe he can't use me in that way, and maybe I can't do that stuff. And I knew what I was doing. And I was saying to myself, don't be an idiot, Andy. If God uses anybody, it's for the kingdom of heaven. Who cares what he's doing? So I knew what I was doing, and I knew it wasn't great. But what bugs me about it, and what bothered me for days afterwards, is I still did it. And I couldn't stop myself. So for 2 or 3 days, right, and I know this might sound a little bit exaggerated, but it's not. For 2 or 3 days, I felt pretty down. And when I traced it back, it all went back to this one tweet where this guy was doing stuff. And it bugged the heck out of me. And I was like, why is that? And it's because of comparison. And it's because of the way it works. And so I'm probably, I imagine, not the only one who's been pretty happy until I look at what someone else has got. So you're happy with your marks in an exam until you see what your mate's got, and then you don't feel so pleased. Or you're happy with, the clothes that you've got until you see the clothes that somebody else has got, or the holiday that you get to go on until you see the holiday that someone else gets to go on, and then you don't feel so pleased about it. And all of us as human beings do that. We've been comparing ourselves to one another as long as there have been human beings, but there's consequences to it. And one of the things that I've been discovering it does is it enslaves you. And it can stop you from living the life that God has put ahead of you to live. And so that's why I want to talk about it. And it starts with just understanding how we do it. So there's 2 different ways to compare yourself to another person. One is what they call upwards comparison. And this is where we compare ourselves to someone who is maybe a bit better than we are at something. So maybe they're in better shape than we are, they do better in their exams, or they've got more money than we do. And sometimes what that can do is that can inspire you if you compare upwards. But most of the time what that does is that makes you feel rubbish. So you compare yourself to someone who's really good and you feel like, oh my word, I'm useless. And then there's downward comparison. That's the reverse, which is when you compare yourself to someone who's not as good as you are at something. So let's say you're playing football. I'm not very good at football. But so long as I'm playing with someone who's worse, I'm fine. Because I can be like, well, just look at that guy. I might not be any good, but as long as he's playing on the same team as me, I'm not the worst person on the team. I'm no good at dancing, as you saw yesterday morning, but so long as I'm finding myself at a silent disco next to someone who's worse at dancing than I am, then I feel okay about myself. This is what guys do when we go to the gym. So when you go to the gym, if I find that I'm going on a weights machine and I have to make the weight heavier than the person in front of me, I'm like, yes, I'm a real man. If I have to make the weight lighter, I feel like, oh, I'm so inadequate, So I try and go to the gym with Mike as often as I can. Then I feel great. And it's upward, downward comparison. And that's how we find what we call self-worth. That's how we're all doing it, kind of like maybe subconsciously some of the time, but it's how we find our estimation of our own worth. And one of the things that's been happening recently is because of social media and the effect and the way that it's shaped us, we have all gone comparison crazy. And the way that social media works, and you'll know this because you're on it, is we all want to present the best version of ourselves, don't we? So we take the selfie, we put the filter on it, and then we show it to the world. We want to put the best version of ourselves out there. And I'm not on Instagram yet, but I want to join because I realize that's where everybody is. And but when I join, I want you guys to think that my life is awesome. So I have been practicing a little bit, just kind of like in anticipation of launching my life on Instagram. And so a couple of weekends ago, I was out and about, and I decided I would take some photos just by way of practicing for when I join Instagram. And I started on a Saturday morning. I decided I'll go for a swim. So I went to the Watford community pool for a swim, and while I was there, I took a selfie, and I put a filter on it, and this is what came out. You can see it on the screen. And the same Saturday, I thought I'm going to go and hang out with some of my friends. So I went to see one of my mates. There's kind of a light filter on this. This guy's been busy recently. I've danced him for a while. And you've got friends who you just click with, who you've known for years. I love it when I saw one of those. And Mike doesn't have many friends in Watford or anywhere, so sometimes I take him along to hang out with my friends, and we kind of go along and hang out together. And one of the great things, though, about living in Watford is that we live down the road from each other. So sometimes we spend some time at Mike's house. This is his semi-detached with a filter. And other times we go to my house. One night we spent some time at my house. That's the Watford skyline you can see there in the background. This one particular evening that I'm talking about, we went out for some food. We were a little bit hungry. I had a burger. I had some ice cream. You know how sometimes on social media it's good to be real as well, like #NoFilter. I'm just going to put it out there as it actually is. I want you to know for the next couple of photos, the filter has been removed. Mike had for him what was quite a modest meal. And he wanted ice cream as well, so we got him an ice cream, and there's no filter on that. And anyway, and then he was exhausted, so he went to bed, and a friend of mine was just having a couple of mates around, for a little party down the road, so I popped down to his house, and we had a little house party, and that was fun. And I was pretty tired the next day, but I thought, I'm going to hang out with my little boy, so I took him to the park, and the two of us just went on a trampoline and did some jumping. And you can see that I'm not on Instagram, but I think already I have a feel for it. And I have a feel for how it works. And I know you guys are all on Snapchat as well, and I'm not on Snapchat, right? But just the other day, for the first time, someone showed me my face in a Snapchat filter, and I was like, wow, I look incredible in this thing. Like, my eyelashes look amazing. I didn't realize it, but they're the best feature on my face. And of course, in real life, I don't look like that, but I want everyone to think I look like that. I must download the Snapchat, and I must use these filters. And what we're doing, obviously, and we know we do it, and I'm slightly exaggerating to make the point, is we present that best version of ourselves. So no one goes home and puts on Facebook or on Twitter like, I just arrived home today at the time that I was expecting. You put out there like, this is the highlight of my day. And so what we're doing when we look at social media is we begin to subconsciously and sometimes consciously compare what we have to what everybody else has got. And what it means is you end up comparing your face to their filter. And your face will always lose in that comparison. Any of our faces would. And so for our grandma, it was like she woke up in the day, she would compare herself to people, but just the people around her, the people on the street or the people at work. But we are 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, getting bombarded. And because it's all seemingly perfect, all the comparison becomes upward. Look at their perfect body. Look at those perfect abs. Look at the money that they have. Look at the cars that they can drive. Look at the jobs that they have. Look at all those friends that seem to find them completely hilarious. Look at the food that they eat. I just eat baked beans most days. These people eat avocados for every single meal. Where do they find them? How come they're always ripe? I've never managed to find a ripe avocado in my life. And it's more than that. It's like this idea that don't they just seem everybody else so whole and so complete, and like they found themselves? And am I the only person who looks at that and feels that in comparison, my life is like this gray, drab, Monday morning experience that never comes to an end? And social media doesn't help us with it, but it's not the only place that we do it. So we compare ourselves. Maybe for you, you compare yourself to the pretty girl in the youth group. Or you compare yourself to the guy that seems to get all the girls. Or you compare yourself to that couple in the youth group. There's always one. You know the ones that are sickeningly in love? You do know them, don't you? And you don't know whether you want to be them or whether you want to kill them. And you compare yourself to them. And what happens is when we do that, comparison comes into the tent of our lives, as it were, and it steals our joy and it steals our self-worth. And we end up doing one of two things. We either compete, I've got to match up, so we get on the treadmill and we run as fast as we can, of trying to get all the filters out there, trying to make sure that we match up to everybody else. We either compete or we give up. I'm not going to compete with you, but my life's just rubbish. And you make me feel rubbish about myself. And it's like it enslaves us. And what Jesus wants to do is he wants to say things to us, always in his word, to set us free. And so I want to look at a passage that as I began to just see this more and more in myself, I turned to and I found some stuff in it that really helped me. And it's a story that Jesus tells. So if you have a Bible, why don't you open it with me? Get it out, open it up. Matthew chapter 20. We're going to be there. If you've got it on your phone, find it on your phone. The words are going to come up on the screen. But we're going to read a story that Jesus tells. Matthew chapter 20, starting in verse 1. He says this: "For the kingdom of heaven is like a landowner who went out early in the morning to hire workers for his vineyard. He agreed to pay them a denarius for the day," that's like a standard day's wage. That's like 60 quid or something. He agreed to pay them a denarius for the day and sent them into his vineyard. So that would have been about 6 in the morning when the working day started. He goes out, he finds this guy, he says, "I'll pay you denarius, go off into the vineyard." Off he goes. About 9 in the morning, he went out and saw others standing in the marketplace doing nothing. He told them, "You also go and work in my vineyard, and I will pay you whatever is right." So they went. He went out again about noon and about 3 in the afternoon and did the same thing. About 5 in the afternoon, he went out and found still others standing around. So 5 in the afternoon is like working day is almost over. You've only got 1 hour of it left. He finds these guys are still not working or doing anything. So he says, "Why have you been standing here all day long, doing nothing?" "Because no one has hired us," they answered. He said to them, "You also go and work in my vineyard." When evening came, the owner of the vineyard said to his foreman, "Call the workers and pay them their wages, beginning with the last ones hired," so those are the ones that were hired at 5 p.m., "and going on to the first." The workers who were hired about 5 in the afternoon came and each received a denarius, so like a full day's wage. So when those came who were hired first, they expected to receive more, as you would. But each one of them also received a denarius. When they had received it, they began to grumble against the landowner. "Those who are hired last worked only 1 hour," they said, "and you have made them equal to us who have borne the burden of the work and the heat of the day?" But he answered one of them, "I am not being unfair to you, friend. Didn't you agree to work for a denarius? Take your pay and go. I want to give the one who was hired last the same as I gave you. Don't I have the right to do what I want with my own money? Or are you envious because I am generous? So the last will be first and the first will be last." And Jesus' story is a genius. And he communicates so much truth through them. At things that can be helpful is to really understand what he's trying to pull out of it. So picture this, right? I just need everybody who's here and in mini-me, if you're at school or at college, but you also have a job. So let's say you work in a cafe, you work in a hairdresser's or whatever, but you have a job of some kind. Would you guys just stand up for a minute, wherever you are? Let's have a look at you. So let's just applaud these people. They get marks, but they also get money. That is tough. And also, any gold diggers, just look around. These are the people with the money. All right, find them later. So, guy down here, what do you do? Cafe, you work in a cafe. All right, everybody else sit down. You stay standing. What's your name? Priam. Okay, Priam. So, Priam here works in a cafe. What's the cafe? What type of cafe? Food and drink cafe, okay, as opposed to the other types. So Priam here works in a cafe, and give me just the name of someone else who works there with you. Emily, all right, Priam and Emily. Now let's say Priam turns up early in the morning, 6 a.m. to start his cafe shift. The floors are grimy, there's grease everywhere, he's got to tidy it up, and he starts to work, and he starts cleaning it up, and he's kind of doing everything. And then the customers start arriving about 7:30, they want to have breakfast, and then he's rushing around, he's taking their orders, he's bringing them fried eggs, he's bringing them bacon, he's wiping it up afterwards, and he just puts in this hard day, and it's one of those hot, sweaty days that happens once or twice a year in this country. And he's grinding away at the cafe. And then Emily, this joker called Emily, just rocks up at 5 p.m. The cafe shuts at 6, and she kind of just wanders in, and she's been sleeping for most of the day, and she kind of just wipes and moves a chair, and then she wanders into the kitchen where the rest of the leftover food is, and she's just eating the leftover food. That's what I would do if I was a waitress or waiter. And she's munching there on the end of the bacon, and then the boss comes, and they pay cash in hand at this cafe because it's illegal. And they say, hey, Emily, come first. We want to give you your 60 quid, which is what you get for a day's work at this cafe. And so they hand Emily 60 quid. And Priam here, she's worked 1 hour, right? He's done 12 times that, literally 12 times that. So he's there thinking, oh my word, Emily got 60 quid for just turning up with wiping a chair and eating the leftover food. I've been slogging my guts out here. I've been busting a gut. So when I get to see the boss, he's going to give me a whole load of stuff. But instead, he turns up and he gets exactly the same as her. 12 times the amount of work, all that blood, all that sweat, all that grease cleared up. And he gets exactly the same. How are you feeling at this point, Priam? He doesn't know, but what he is feeling is he's feeling angry, and he's feeling confused, and he's outraged. He's barely holding his emotions together right now. You can't see that, but I can see it. He's almost fallen to the ground. And it's like that feeling of not just the big, overwhelming feeling any of us would have in that moment is, it's not fair. You can sit down, Priam. Thank you. It's not fair. And guys, with this story, what Jesus wants to draw out of us is that emotion that we feel so often when we compare. He wants you to have that, because what it is this person's life just seems so together and mine is such a mess. Or they've got what I've got, but I worked much harder for it, and how come they're made equal to me? And how come they seem to have all the luck, or God seems to bless them with everything? They're the ones with all the gifts. And what an emotion, there's all sorts of a cocktail of emotions that comes up, but an overwhelming one is we feel like this just isn't fair. This just isn't right. So he gets you to identify with that guy in the story that says, this isn't fair. And then when you sit with that emotion that we all feel when we compare, then what he does is he asks you 3 questions. And the vineyard owner, who represents God, speaks to the worker who's angry, who represents you and I. And he asks him 3 questions. And you might want to write these down if you like taking notes, because these are 3 questions that I've been using every time I've compared myself to someone ever since I read this passage. And I've found them to be really helpful. You're sitting there with all that emotion going on, oh, this isn't fair, I feel so, it's a question number 1 that we want to let God ask us in that moment. Didn't we have a deal, says God? Didn't we have a deal? The way that it comes in the passage is verse 13. He says, I am not being unfair to you, friend. Didn't you agree to work for a denarius? Like at 6 a.m. this morning, isn't that what we shook on? And let God ask you that question. What's genius about that question is that what we do when we compare is we take our eyes off God and we put them onto the other person. So Priam's putting his eyes on Emily, and he's just like, what's going on with Emily, and how come that's happening? God doesn't bring Emily into it. God doesn't say, let's have a conversation. You don't know what's going on in Emily's life. He just says, forget Emily. This is about me and you. Hey, Andy, don't worry about that person. You and I have a chat. Didn't you agree a deal when you signed up to follow me? And that notion of putting our eyes onto others when we compare, taking them off the maker and putting them onto somebody else, is something human beings have been doing as long as they've been human beings. They do it in the Bible. So probably one of the best examples is this king called Saul. He's the first king of Israel. And he's got loads of stuff going for him. So he's a head and shoulders taller than everybody else in Israel. He's a good-looking guy. He wins he becomes the first king. He wins all these battles. If he had Instagram, he'd have 1 million followers. Life is going well for Saul. But then what Saul does is he makes some mistakes and he messes it up. And this other guy comes on the scene called David. And David starts to do quite well. And there's this particular moment where David and Saul go out to fight a battle with their enemies, the Philistines, and they win, they're victorious. And then they turn around and they come back to the town. And as they come back, the ladies of the town come dancing out to meet them, to greet them. And they're singing this song. And you can read it in 1 Samuel chapter 18, verse 7. It says, as they danced, they sang, Saul has slain his thousands, and David his tens of thousands. And Saul, when he hears that, he gets really angry. And I can totally relate to him on that, right? Because it's not that he's comparing himself to David in this moment. It's that he's being compared by other people to David, and he's coming up short. I don't know if you've ever had that experience where your mum compares you to somebody else. And she's like, oh, why aren't you more like so-and-so, or whatever. She compares you to them, and then you feel bad. Or let's say, the girls in the youth group are comparing you to other guys in the youth group, and they're ranking you, and you feel like, you're all right, but this person's much better. Or the guys at school are comparing you to other girls at school, and they, you're hot, but she's hotter. You're sporty, but they're sportier. You're funny, but they're funnier. And you find yourself coming out in a bad way from that. Of course, you're going to feel angry. And I remember hearing one preacher talk about this passage, and he says, and you've got to especially feel for Saul, because it's not just that they're comparing him to David, they've literally made a song and a dance about it. It's like a full-on Broadway production, like, woohoo, you've killed this many people, but David's killed so many more. So of course he gets angry, and then his response is what loads of our responses when we find ourselves in that situation. It says in verse 9, it says, and from that time on, Saul kept a close eye on David. I'm going to watch you. And keep my eye on you. What we do is when there's certain people that we're regularly comparing ourselves to, maybe I'm just the only one here, but I find that I keep an eye on them more than anybody else. I watch what they post. I watch how their life is going. And the mistake he's made is he's taken his eyes off God and he's put them onto David. And God's question is brilliant in this passage because it's, hey, Andy, come back. Don't forget them. Look at me. Didn't we have a deal? You and I, when you signed up on this great adventure that I'm calling you on, what were the terms that we agreed? Because I think you'll find, Andy, I've been faithful to that deal. And when I think about what it was the deal was, I give him my broken little life, and he gives me his perfect son. And we're told in the Bible that the wages that we get is not a denarius, like 60 quid. We're told elsewhere, Ephesians chapter 1 says it, we're given every spiritual blessing in Jesus. So think about it like this, right? Imagine you arrived in this arena or in Mini-Me this morning. And when you walked in, there were no people here, but the whole place was full of presents, right? Wrapped up in this shiny paper with big bows on it, big ones, little ones, piled high as you could see to the ceiling. And they've all got your name on it, these presents. And you think, oh my word, this is unbelievable, right? So you walk up and you open up the first present. And you realize that this first present is worth more than Bill Gates' entire fortune. How would you respond? Just if that was the first one, you'd be like, I'm rich. I'm quitting my job at the cafe. Stuff Emily. You'd be like, wow, this is incredible. And then what I'm saying is, when you become a Christian, it's kind of like that. So you walk into Jesus. Imagine Jesus is the arena or he's Mini-Me. You walk into relationship with him. And then what you get in him is every spiritual blessing. So you start start to unwrap the presents as you follow him. And the first one, that any of them you unwrap, you'll find they're worth more than money could ever buy. So you open up the first one. It's a deep peace. Real security. You can put your head on the pillow at the end of the day and just be like, oh. You open up the next one. Total forgiveness. Wow. Everything I've ever done, wiped clean. You come to the next one. Eternal life. This is a good one. Want to hang on to that. You go to the next one. And it's not like it all happens at once, but what you find as you follow Jesus, this has been my experience, is that there's not a single promise that he ever makes that he doesn't keep. He always backs up his act. And so the first question he'd have for you as you look at somebody else, and same for me, is, hey, look at me. What was the deal that we agreed? Because I think you'll find I've been faithful to the deal. Second question. Can't I bless who I want, Andy? Can't I bless who I want? The way that it comes in the passage is the vineyard owner, he says, don't I have the right to do what I want with my own money? And when God asks us these questions, he's not trying to condemn us, but he's having a conversation with us. And sometimes what that does is that reveals what's going on in our hearts. And when God says to me, I'm feeling like, why is that person getting this? And that's not fair. Like when God says to me, Andy, can't I bless who I want? Or do I need your approval first? My honest response is, well, it would be nice if you at least checked. Because I clearly know some stuff about that person that you must not know, otherwise you wouldn't have blessed her. Do you have any idea how cruel and vindictive she is? Like, you shouldn't be giving her that. What are you thinking? Just use me as a sounding board. I don't have to have the final say, but I want to say to him, bless some people, but Lord, don't bless other people, because the honest truth is that's how I think it should work. Don't you think that sometimes deep down that like the love of God should be given to some people who deserve it? Let's make a list. Number 1, me. Number 2, other people like me. But number 3, I'm not sure about this person. That we think that the love and the mercy of God should be given to people who we approve of. But that isn't how Jesus' mercy works. It's not how God's love works. So what Jesus does is he blows the doors off that understanding of it. One place he does it is in the Sermon on the Mount, when he's talking about the love of God. And I love this. What he does is he takes the love of God and he compares it to the weather. He says the love of God is like the weather. And what he means by that is that it doesn't discriminate, just for everybody. So if you got the weather you deserved, every Man United supporter here would be under a permanent thundercloud. Mike is one of those. I said that in order to get a reaction from you. But if we got the weather we deserved, we'd all have different weather. But what Jesus is saying is the sun shines on the good and on the bad. The rain falls on the righteous and on the unrighteous. So it is with the love of God. It's poured out on all of us, on anyone who'll have it. It's not about a status it's not about earning it. It's never about deserving it. It's just given to you. And the mistake that I make when I look at other people's blessings and I think, why have you given them that? Is I think it's about deserving it. And I think I've taken this too literally, and I think it really is a wage, when what it is always a gift. It's always a gift. Even the guy that starts work at the start of the day, he didn't deserve this. He was found. He was just hanging around in the square. He'd have been like anybody else, hanging around in the square all day, unless the owner came to him and called him out of his lostness into his foundness and then gave him stuff to do. And so the question that God would ask when we're comparing is, hey, can't I bless who I want? And by the way, isn't that how you got in? Question number 3. And I kind of imagine Jesus with these questions. He's a little bit like a football player or something. Yeah, so hits it with his right foot. Didn't we have a deal? Hits it with his left foot. Can't I bless who I choose? And then he absolutely smashes it into the back of net with this third one. All right? Are you jealous? The way it's in the passage is, are you envious because I'm generous? Are you jealous? When God asks me that, my response is, absolutely not. Ouch. Maybe that's what's going on. And I reckon the reason we do experience jealousy and we do feel like, what's going on with them and how come that's not for me? Part of the reason anyway is because we don't understand what we've been given. We don't understand always, or we forget maybe, what we've received. And there's different ways of trying to, I suppose, deal with the comparison that we'll all do for the whole of our lives, all right? There's different ways of trying to deal with it. This might seem like a random picture, but think about it like this. I remember on my stag do, we went paintballing. And if you've ever been paintballing before, you'll know that when you turn up, you just get paired up with all these random people who just happen to be there on the same day. You get put into teams. And we were there, and one of my, because I was the stag, everyone else was wearing camo gear, but I was wearing this bright orange jumpsuit, so I got shot quite a lot during the day. And there was this one particular game where the goal of the game is one team started this end, one team started this end of this big field, and then there's this bunker right in the middle. And you have to make your way to the bunker. Everyone's got to run to the bunker and get into the bunker and capture it. And within about 2 seconds of this game, I was shot by about 50 people. So I was dead and I was out. And I remember standing on the sidelines watching the rest of this game play out. I'm watching one of my friends, a mate of mine called Chris, who was still in there, and he was running towards the bunker with this little blonde girl who we didn't know but who happened to be on our team. And Chris and this little blonde girl are running towards the bunker. Meanwhile, from the other end of the pitch, these 5 other guys are also heading towards the bunker. And I remember it because Chris and small blonde girl got to this bit where the bunker was, and then at that point, the 5 other guys also arrived, and they lowered their weapons. And then it began to go in slow motion as I watched it play out in front of me. They lower their weapons. I am expecting at this point Chris, who is quite a sporty guy, to do something like, run little blonde girl, run into the bunker, I will protect you, or to run into the bunker. But instead, what Chris did, and I promise you I'm not making this up, what he did, slow motion, is he reached out, he grabbed the small blonde girl by the waist, and he used her as a human shield. And so these 5 guys, they unload their paintballs, and small blonde girl goes, as he kind of holds her and backs his way into the bunker. And there's a couple of true story. There's a couple of things that cracked me up about it afterwards, right? One was when he came off the pitch, he wasn't even ashamed of himself. He was quite pleased. The second thing was, right, he's in a vulnerable position there. These guys are aiming their guns at him. He's in a vulnerable position. And on the right-hand side, he has a bunker. And on the left-hand side, he has a small blonde girl. And which does he choose to use to defend himself? He goes for the little blonde girl. Comparison will come for you. Come for your joy. Come for your self-worth. Come for the purpose that's your life, the only one, you're the only you. It'll come for you. And then you have a choice about what do you do. 3 options. Option number 1, grab a human shield. Put a filter on. Reach for an achievement. Reach for something that makes you feel better. Try and compete. Try and match up. Option number 2, just let it shoot you. Let it steal your self-worth. Just stand there. I am rubbish. I am inadequate. No one's ever going to use me. No one's ever going to love me. Option number 3, there's a bunker. Run to the bunker. God is described in many places in the Bible as a fortress. We just sang about it, a strong tower. And you can turn to him and remind yourself again of who he is. So I just want to finish by reading a scripture. This is in Isaiah chapter 40, verse 25 to 31. And again, as we compare ourselves to one another and we feel it's not fair and inadequate, listen to these verses. So this is God speaking, and he says this, "To whom will you compare me? Or who is my equal, says the Holy One. Lift up your eyes and look to the heavens. Who created all these? He who brings out the starry host one by one and calls forth each of them by name. Because of his great power and mighty strength, not one of them is missing. Why do you complain, Jacob?" That's the people of Israel. Put your name there. "Why do you complain, Jacob? Why do you say, Israel, my way is hidden from the Lord. My cause is disregarded by my God." He sees everybody else, but he doesn't see me. "Do you not know? Have you not heard? The Lord is the everlasting God, the creator of the ends of the earth.
He will not grow tired or weary, and his understanding no one can fathom. He gives strength to the weary and increases the power of the weak. Even youths grow tired and weary, and young men stumble and fall, but those who hope in the Lord will renew their strength. They will soar on wings like eagles. They will run and not grow weary. They will walk and not be faint. What comparison does is it doesn't just steal your joy, it steals your strength, because the joy of the Lord is your strength. And what he says is, hey, come back to me and see who you've got. I'm the incomparable one. Am I not enough? And I forget, and it's taking Jesus so long to teach me who we get in him. Do you understand what you've received when you become a Christian? You get a father, we've talked about this week, an everlasting dad. Do you have any idea how many people want that? Where it's like the love is unconditional. It was given to you before you were born. That moment that you were born, he said, yes, you're mine. He wrote his name on you, your name on his hand. He was like, you're going to be mine forever. I'm going to love you always. He doesn't just see you, this dad. He delights in you. He takes pleasure in you. He's always wanting to be with you. You receive not just a father, but a savior. The perfect Savior is the person of Jesus, who comes with kindness. He comes with compassion. He comes with mercy. He comes with love, but also with great power that no one can rival. We sing the songs, but do we understand the truth of that? No one comes close to him. He has power to set you free. What it means is that he will take you, your life as it is, and he will use it for his glory and for his kingdom. You receive a Savior who will transform every aspect of your being, that you will look like the God who made you. You'll be made into his image. We receive the Spirit of the living God. He comes and lives in me. He lives inside of me. People wake up all over this planet wondering, where's God? Where is he? You wake up with him in you. He's made his home in you. It means you can never get away. If I go over here, he's coming with me. If I go over here, he's coming with me. It means that when you wake up, you can have a conversation with the designer of the universe and the Lord of heaven and earth. You can read your Bible and he will speak to you. You can see him work through your weakness and I can see him work through mine. What it means is we've received a God, and the mercy of this God is like an ocean. You can never, ever get to the end of it. We think his mercy is like this tiny little drop that we have to kind of get out from heaven, but we're the drop and we fall into it. So what it means is that everything we've done, he's forgiven. Everything we ever will do, he will forgive. And that's not a permission slip to do whatever we want, but what it means is we'll never, ever, ever get to the end of his grace. There's literally no God that anyone will ever describe to you, no God that comes close to even being a shadow of the God of the Bible, the Father who loves you, the Son who saves you, the Spirit who lives in you, and he's yours. He's yours. He's given himself to you. And so what are we comparing ourselves with? You've got a new pair of trainers. They're very nice. I've got the incomparable one. And it's not to lord it over people. We want to share who he is with others. But that's the reality. And I know that can sound super spiritual. We've got real needs, and they do matter, and they matter to him. And it's just not about saying, don't worry about it, we've got Jesus. But it's just remembering again the concrete truth of our salvation. And I imagine if I were you and I were listening to this, what I'd probably say is, that sounds great, Andy. But at the end of the day, this afternoon, I'm going to compare myself to that person, and I'm still going to feel bad. But now I'm going to feel doubly bad because I know I shouldn't do it. You know, the truth is, I'm still jealous because I still wish she was going out with me and not with him. And I get that. And I'm not saying that this is going to solve the problem for us, because we'll all compare ourselves to someone later on today. But it's a start. It's a place to begin. And what it is it's recognizing when you do it, it's just going to rob you. And also then it's just reminding yourself, it's asking that question, does God satisfy me? And sometimes the answer to that is yes. And sometimes the answer to that is no, he doesn't. And that's when we need to come back and remind ourselves again of his goodness and his love and his compassion. 3 questions. Didn't we have a deal? Can't I bless who I want? Are you jealous? Andy, look at me.
Are you jealous? You've got me, you dummy. You've got me. I'm yours till the end and beyond it. Amen. Mike.